Yes.
So we can move on?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you very much again for being here. My name is Sergio Chaparro, and I am the Behavioral and Social Sciences Research Librarian at Cabell Library. And welcome to this webinar on researching globally, search strategies and tips. The goal here is to present you some resources and hear your questions or comments about what I'm gonna offer you. And it's important for you to understand that there are multiple things that I'm gonna say about resources and strategies to search globally. I am not focusing on one specific area, but I'm trying to bring together several different fields and their global research to illustrate you about some strategies and tips. First of all, now that you are comfortable seated, disclaimer. There is no actual accurate roadmap on how to do global research, okay? What you're going to see here is very empirically based. I have also collected here some tips from searching in the social and behavioral sciences for a long time. There is some literature that I have used for this presentation that actually investigates, searching resources globally, which I'm very happy to share later. Remember, please, that researching globally is a moving target, okay? Keep that in mind. It's a moving target and requires trial, improvement, redesign, and constant calibration. This is more of an introduction to resources and strategies, and I strongly recommend using this webinar as some sort of initial checklist for researching globally, especially if you are starting to do that. Some of the strategies that I suggest here are strongly associated also with the current scholarly communication arena, which could change a long time. Nothing is actually static here. As global information problems change and reshape, global information sources change too. I don't have time here. We don't have enough space to cover all the possible resources, but I recommend always, you have no idea how much I stress this, I recommend your subject librarian as the person to consult always in case of additional questions, okay? That is, I think this disclaimer should give you an idea about what to expect. The goals of this session are to identify the most important databases and resources for accessing global information for research purposes, to select and search some of the most important international agency resources, to understand the major challenges that arise when searching for global information, which comes at the end of this webinar, and to learn about some key databases and resources for Spanish-speaking research. And notice that there is a vast amount of them, and I have selected certain examples that could help you clarify the information environment for your own research. Why global researching? Why do we do global research? I was thinking about this, and my initial thoughts came together around these major ideas. We do global research to get a more comprehensive view of the research available, first of all. Second, we do global research to uncover research gaps and to find new research and data. And let me stress something important for this webinar. I am not going to cover mostly data. Data is a whole different story, okay? Global data is a whole different story, and we have specialists for this. But I'm gonna touch upon some of the issues. And also we do global research to obtain innovative or unique perspectives on a problem, which, it responds to our need to address local problems with international solutions. So this is what how I have usually been exposed to global research and the reasons for global research. Remember also that science is international by nature. So Uncovering the networks and sources of information globally complements everything and anything we do locally. And also the problems we're dealing with here are most probably being addressed and studied somewhere else across the globe. And probably other places have innovative ways of solving those problems that we are not aware of. So with that in mind, as an example, I have thought for this webinar, I thought about areas that are strongly connected with global research. And I thought about medicine, policy, and business. And those of you who are familiar with these areas understand here three major areas, three major disciplines that are strongly connected to global research. We also need to understand, in light of this, medical research, policy research, or business research. And again, these are just examples. What we need to understand is that a lot of this, of the global research that we see attached to these disciplines is multidisciplinary and multilingual, okay? So keep that in mind. Also, you can build strong connections between these areas and other areas. Where could I start then? The starting point is very simple. And we start by what is really intuitive and simple. How about identifying our own resources here at VCU? What about our own databases? So what I did in the beginning was I went to our list of databases that you see here. Okay, this list of databases is available at this link on the library, on the Cabell Library website, on the VCU Library website, sorry. And you can search for database names, and also you can get information about the content. So for example, I went to policy, and I did a search for policy. Imagine that you belong to the policy arena, to the policy research, which, you know, touches upon several different subdisciplines. And I found, for example, databases, searching for policy, I found databases that are international and global in content. I found EIU country reports, for example. I found here the worldwide political science abstracts. You see, just by examining the titles and scope of our databases, you can start identifying databases that contain global research, that index global research, that comprise global research. I did the same for business. There is a reason why business is strongly connected to global. Investment requires solid investment, and success requires solid information. And we have a wonderful business librarian who can tell you everything about it. But I did a search for business in our list of databases. And look, I found again EIU country reports, and I found, for example, Business Insights Global. Notice how the Business Insights Global database comprises international research. An important component of research in some disciplines is intrinsically global. I did a search on international medicine, and I found that we have databases from this list. We have databases that index international research. MBase, has an international scope. It indexes biomedicine and pharmacology citations, okay? Publish international literature on traumatic stress, or Sport Discus, which is frequently used in the fields of sports medicine and education, very interdisciplinary in nature too. So again, from the very beginning, you can identify databases that are international in scope. And that is a good beginning. That allows you to move along to the inside of the databases, the within. I did the same search for global because I'm like, well, let's see which databases connect to global and see here. See here the amount of databases that contain the word global. See here the amount of databases that contain the word international. Notice how diverse they are, okay? So in many, as I mentioned before, multidisciplinarity is the key. You have to have a very open mind about the possibility of some of the research present here connecting to other international research. Notice how the word international repeats along here. And the same here with world. I should say that world news is a very interesting starting point for research. Usually very underestimated, especially when you're looking for local research, but it's a really good way to identify research because you can get news about research. What I'm trying to show you here is that just by typing some terms into the big list of our databases, you can find global or international specific databases. You can find global, you can find content that attaches to global research. So what should I do once I select a specific database? Maybe I could look within the database for efficient ways to look for international research. From the very beginning, as a starting point, every database should have a list of journals that it indexes. One way of verifying the international or global scope of a database is examining what is exactly what that database indexes. In this way, you can check if journals in languages other than English, for example, are indexed by that database. Every database should offer you a complete list of the publications it selects and indexes. If you have questions, connect with your subject librarian. This example from EBSCO databases, okay, shows you how you can get access to the publications authority file, okay? That is all the journal titles included in the database. This could be very useful if you want to verify that a specific journal, maybe in another language, is in the database of your choice. So, with that in mind, let me give you a few examples. In order to do that in Academic Search Complete, you go to the database, and on the upper left side, you're gonna see publications here. You see the arrow? If you click here, you will have access to the list of publications. The same in Business Search Complete. If you want to scan for foreign journal titles, this could be a very good way to start. What I did is I went to Academic Search Complete, and look what I did. I did a search on Academic Search Complete, the database, one of our most important databases, and you can see it listed as one of the most popular databases at VCU. And I searched in the list of publications for the word medicina, the Spanish word for medicine. And look what I found. So I was able immediately to identify Spanish-speaking journals, okay, that or Portuguese journals that were connected to medicine, just by using one Spanish word. Once you are within the database, there's a whole different story. Remember, another option is to search within the database for subject headings or keywords which relate to global, world, or international research. For that purpose, you will need to identify find the index, identify the index or thesaurus of your database, and search for the most appropriate terms. Your librarian can come very handy for this. There are great tutorials in most databases. Let me say that keywords and subject headings are standardized terms that describe the contents of the articles or sources inside a database. This is a more precise, okay, a more efficient way of searching for international context. They are probably one of the this is probably one of the fastest ways to identify relevant articles because you can be more precise in your search. As an example, I'm being an education librarian. I went to ERIC. I went to the thesaurus of ERIC, our most important education database, which, by the way, indexes a lot of content related to other areas. And I typed the word international in the thesaurus. And if you can see from my screen, I found that the results tell me that ERIC does index international educational perspectives in different areas: international assessment, international baccalaureate, international cooperation, international education, and so on. So you can do the same with the index of the database that you have selected. You can look at how words like international, global, or world are indexed and index the information that is attached to those databases. I did the same with Business Search Complete. I went to the thesaurus and I searched for the word international. And not unsurprisingly, I found all these entries, that is, for keywords that connect to international issues in business: international accounting, international advertising, international agencies, international agricultural cooperation. As you can see, I hope this is a more specific, a more efficient, and more precise way of getting directly into the international info and global research that databases offer. Now, some databases are more sophisticated than others. Dow Jones Factiva, another important business database, has a code for global issues, okay? Connect to your librarian about this. I started using Factiva 20 years ago. It has evolved in many ways. Factiva has a code here. Adding this code to your search, the code is here, will allow you to search for global issues and concerns such as the environment, health, nutrition, demographics, and other issues with a worldwide focus. Okay, not use, however, on international roundups. They probably have another code for that kind of information, for indexing that kind of information. So this is just to show you how different databases have different ways of indexing global research. Some are more sophisticated than others, like Factiva. Okay, start playing with this. I am sure that you will gain access to you will have a more efficient way of searching for global research. Suggestions. These are my suggestions. And you can take this, you can use this as a checklist. Identify first those databases which provide global context. It's usually in the scope description of the database. Second, examine the database for global journal titles, okay? Knowing some foreign titles in native language could help you because you can type, the title of the journal immediately. Third, look up into the indexing of the database for keywords related to global content or issues, and you have a very solid way to start. Remember, however, that when searching databases, there should be options also. When you're searching for content, there should be options to limit your search via language or geographic region, which is also another way of investigating global research. Some databases like Web of Science, another one of our most popular databases, offer you the possibility of limiting and refining your results by agency or university producing the research, which could be very useful for global research. If you already know that there is an agency in Algeria or there is an agency in the Philippines that actually connects to your research. However, this standard in Web of Science is not a standard in all databases. Again, ask your librarian for this. Identifying a specific university, agency, or educational institution which connects to the research you are interested allows you also to, hey, email them, email the researchers directly and ask them questions. Never a bad idea to start connecting to those researchers that you are interested in. What could I do next? I have spoken about databases, indexing, codes, strategies to address, searching databases. There is an entire additional, there are multiple areas, but I chose to talk about open access, searching organizations, agencies, and think tanks. My apologies for the simplicity of this graph, but I believe that most times simple is really better. My next suggestion has to do with the path to follow after databases. Databases are not the only way. This would include open access resources where there is a lot of rich global research, searching in global organizations like the United Nations or the World Bank, for example, to name just a few. And finally, searching for agencies and think tanks that produce global research. You might be surprised also about the fact that some of these agencies or think tanks hold better and higher quality research, global research and data, and actually more knowledge than the actual national governments. The issue is that there is an important number of national governments that do not have the resources to produce or collect or aggregate data or produce research of relevant quality. All of this is an expensive enterprise. You might want to know also that some governments do not hold enough solid standards of openness for the research or data their nations produce. This makes necessary for you to look for alternatives such as international organizations or agencies, or sometimes local information gatekeepers. This phenomenon, I think, is more noticeable regarding data, okay? So keep this in mind as a set of premises before accessing or searching information here. Open access. Open access refers to free, immediate online access to information and additional information that is free from most copyright and licensing restrictions. It's an increasingly important wave in research globally. And we have at VCU tremendous resources. You have no idea for open access searching. We have a scholarly communications librarian who does open access. So questions should be directed to that person. And this is very useful because here you can explore trends in other parts of the world. The open access research, keep in mind, has a very important global component, okay? Many countries around the world, unable to follow the traditional expensive models of scholarly publishing, choose to publish their own journals. And yes, they do have an important amount of peer-reviewed content. But the important part is that it's open to everybody. And in many cases, they publish their research in their own languages, which is more attractive, more interesting, and more enticing for your research. As a matter of fact, here's an example. We have an open access research guide that offers you a more in-depth look into how to find open access research. And there are here resources. You will be surprised by most of them. You will be surprised by the amount, variety, and quality of the global research available. This is just a glimpse of what is available, okay? You see here, directory of open access journals. Be ready to be surprised. It indexes 15,315 journals. Research from 134 countries. Okay, pretty impressive, I would say, if you are doing research globally, something to keep in mind. Okay, now, what's next? Agencies, organizations, and think tanks. It's always relevant to ask yourself the following questions before starting your research, before starting your search. The first one is there an agency connected to my research interest? Answering this question could be extremely efficient. The issue of data, the second question, is always relevant. Is that, do these organizations have data available? How reliable it is? Because why would you spend time following unreliable or incomplete data? Okay. How often are the information and data updated? This is also an extremely important question, because up-to-date information, my experience tells me, is in most cases a very good sign of high quality information. Agencies, organizations, and think tanks are extremely versatile sources of knowledge. If you know how to search them, and if they are properly maintained and updated, you will be gold. You can obtain a very important global research. However, and there is always a however, okay? Some of these organizations are big. I would like you to consider the size and research scope of international organizations like the United Nations. This is by no means an easy enterprise. The United Nations alone, you can see here the basic information, comprises 37 funds, programs, specialized agencies, and others. Not one or two, but 37. So it's not enough to think strategically about the United Nations, but to consider which fund, which program will be more useful to my research. Add to that the existence of 6 official languages, okay? One tip I have learned when dealing with international organizations, like this one, is to pay attention to their organizational structure. Somewhere, there is always an organizational structure link. There's usually a chart somewhere. And this is very helpful, okay? This is very helpful when you want to identify the specific programs that you want to investigate, okay? Keep in mind also that information organization, dissemination, and deliverance at international organizations is not particularly smooth and standardized. Every international organization could have a different interface, not all of them very friendly. So you might need to spend some time updating your bookmarks, for example, if there are changes. I myself, certainly, I prefer the European Union, okay, in terms of information access, but again, it's a preference. So keep in mind the size and the varieties of information access and dissemination that you can find in international organizations. Keep in mind that websites are sometimes difficult to navigate. Some links are broken, okay, but you can find very good trends in research and research problems. And when searching in international organizations, keep your mind open for connections. As an example, the World Health Organization might not be connected to your research directly if you're doing research in education, but that doesn't mean that the World Health Organization doesn't produce research that may be connected to what you are interested in. So it's important to not to be afraid to dig into these organizations because you can find some really important stuff. Okay, these are my words about international organizations. Think tanks are extremely dynamic. They represent in many ways the end of government monopolies on information, for good and for bad. Okay, you can get, you can find, you can retrieve extremely dynamic research, very up-to-date information, high-quality information, different formats, impactful and original research, and sometimes unique data that other governments don't have. But it's not that there are just a few of think tanks. The 2019 Go to Think Tank Index report, which scans think tanks worldwide, is produced by the University of Pennsylvania, has this graph, and see the number of think tanks here, okay? Look, it's not that there are a few, there are a lot, okay? The article is, this index, which is a very good scan of think tanks, is available here. So there is a size, okay? There is a number of think tanks. So choosing your think tank might be picking and selecting the think tanks, searching the think tanks through unified search could be useful. And that's why we have a really, really good Google custom search for think tanks that searches more than 1,200 think tanks and research centers. And I use it often when dealing with the International Addictions Program, etc. This is very useful. The link is here. I invite you to search for it and to test for it, okay? Gray literature is another important silo, another important niche. Is literature not intended for publication that a lot of agencies, organizations, think tanks, governments produce? Very important for global research, a white paper, a report. Very important for global research. Most of our research guides at VCU contain instructions on finding gray literature. So if you are interested in gray literature, there is a link here to our research guide, and you will find instructions to search for them. Our research guide on systematic reviews, for example, offers you a section of tools for researching gray literature. I should also add that disciplines like medicine and policy or public affairs work usually with vast amounts of gray literature. This is the title, and this is the link. And notice that all the options that you have to search for gray literature. Our International Program in Addiction Studies Research Guide offers you search capabilities for intergovernmental organizations, non-governmental organizations, think tanks, finding policy, all of them connected to global research. So you can customize your search to find policy, for example, global policy, international policy, through these tools. So I'm leaving you here with the title of the research guide and the link that you can use directly, okay? I'm gonna move now into a often forgotten set of tools that connect to global research, and that is domestic search engines. They are more popular than we think, okay? My advice is just try to verify the coverage and scope whenever possible. I assume that if you're gonna use domestic search engines, you know the language, you know the language of these worldwide domestic search engines, which are not just 2 or 3, by the way, okay? These are the most popular: Naver, Baidu, Ache, South Korea, China, Brazil, okay? Here's a list This is an article from 2016, and there are quite a few here that have been around for a long time. And again, they could also complement your search, okay? Digging into domestic search engines that index domestic documentation, domestic resources could be also very helpful. This is an example of the very colorful Brazilian Achei, okay, that searches not only Brazil, but also Latin America. Again, I think a very good complement to all the tools that I have discussed before. We're entering the last stretch of this webinar, Spanish resources. It was very hard for me, very difficult for me to try to pick, because this is more of an introduction and a checklist. But I thought about the following: databases, Spanish and Latin American research networks, the letter ñ, and world catalogs, which is also sometimes a forgotten resource. In terms of, so I want to focus on all of them. Starting with databases. We have some databases at VCU that connect to Spanish-speaking research, okay? To the target more specific Spanish-speaking research, like Medic Latina or Latin American newspapers. In terms of Spanish databases for scholarly research, Spanish, Latin American, Caribbean, Ibero-American, there is a huge amount of them. Being the most important, one of the most important, it has been around for a long time, HAPI, the Hispanic American Periodicals Index. Very powerful from the point of view of scholarship, okay? So if you could get access to it, and if you're looking at the Spanish-speaking scholarly production, this could help you a lot, okay? Research networks. The Spanish-speaking world has a very strong tradition of research networks, mainly because without the strong government or educational funded research and scholarly environments, scholars and researchers have to group together, build up strong connections. And these two are really impressive: the Ibero-American Program for Science, Technology, and Development, and the Inter-American Institute for Global Change Research, okay? These are two of the most powerful research networks in Latin America. Remember that networks also facilitate contacts. I cannot stress enough the fact that when you are doing global research, it's never a bad idea. It's never a bad idea to connect with the researchers abroad. So these two, add these two to your bookmarks if you are considering a Spanish-speaking scholarly research. And notice that technology development and global change connect to a lot of several disciplines. Talking about searching for Spanish-speaking resources, remember that we have a letter ñ, okay? Spanish has some unique letters, okay? You might want to adjust your search query for the following words: campaña, campaign; español, Spanish; enseñanza, teaching or education, okay? Because they are important if you are building search queries that connect to research. Database search boxes won't forgive you if you don't insert the ñ correctly. I know this may sound completely irrelevant, but sometimes you are stuck with your query. You don't seem to go anywhere, and it's because you have to write some of the characters correctly. Okay, the same in other languages. Okay, the same in other languages. World catalogs always come very handy. We have available at VCU two major, and I mean it, world catalogs, okay? It's not only about specific scholarly databases, but it's also about world catalogs that will never dismiss the value of a great world catalog. The contents are huge, and we have two interfaces for accessing, for example, WorldCat, the first one of the biggest and most important world catalogs. It never hurts, to look into world catalogs. We were talking about Spanish, but I need to stress also, since we have talked about open access, Portuguese, Brazil. I cannot leave this webinar without informing you about the Scientific Library Online, which is a cooperative open access project, one of the most remarkable open access examples in the world. It contains research from 16 different countries in Latin America, okay? And it's a remarkable, in terms of Portuguese language, there are significant global research resources. Brazilian researchers, Brazilian scholars, you should know, and research proves this, have a tradition of strong connections with the first world. So it never hurts to go directly to their native research in their own language and examine their open access research and contents. Cielo, the Scientific Library Online, is one of the most important ones. And believe me, once you look at it, you're gonna be extremely impressed by the availability and the variety of research resources. Cielo comes as a BIREME, was one of the forces at the Latin American Caribbean Center on Health Sciences Information, okay, which used to be called Biblioteca Regional de Medicina, was one of the promoters of Cielo. And again, Portuguese language scholarship has a strong connection, strong tradition of connecting with English speaking research. So never dismiss Portuguese also as an option worldwide. This is the interface of Cielo, and this is the link to search the Scientific Electronic Library Online. If you like Cielo, you will love Redalic also, which is another network of scientific journals in Latin America. Is Red de Revistas Científicas de América Latina y España y Portugal. It includes Spain and Portugal. All of this is free. All of this is open, accessible to all of you. Keep in mind, before we go, when searching for government agencies abroad, and the same happens here, government agencies sometimes just disappear, new administrations come, they just disappear or get reshaped and morphed into sometimes another agency. In the US, we have the publication manual. We have a manual of US agencies where you can investigate that. That's not the case abroad all the time. So keep in mind that when searching for government agencies. Verify always the reliability and accuracy of the information and data available. Combine methods for searching. And when searching for data may be a whole different story. And we have wonderful specialists here at VCU who can help, at Cabot Library, who can help you with that. Before we go, I wanted to share this with you. Accessibility is the key for global research, okay? Clarity and accessibility are critical in accessing public information. For you researchers, this might be a challenge sometimes. In many ways, it could be that the information does exist, but it is difficult to access. So I recommend lots of patience and searching through multiple methods, contacting information gatekeepers, contacting researchers, asking questions as the keys to your success. Thank you very much. Muchas gracias. Muito obrigado. If you have any questions, we will be more than happy to address them. If there are any questions. Anytime, feel free to contact me if you have any questions. You're welcome. It was a real pleasure. Thank you, Karen.